So we're class, I believe, 122 on the Golden Doves. Wow. We're page 68. We're quoting Rabbi Emmanuel Abu Ab on the Hebrew system of morality. So here's a quote. I'm going to read it and try to explain it from time to time. God, the omnipotent, having created the entire celestial and elemental machine, the planets and the stars in the ethereal part. So there's Bashamayim Mima'al. So you have the what we would call perhaps the solar system, the galaxy, and the galaxies in plural in modern terms. The herbs, plants, and animals in the inferior part, or planet Earth, and all the life forms on planet Earth. Again, translating it into modern parlance. Whose substance he made out of the earth, right? So all the life forms are made from the earth itself. And as a form, he blew into him. I'm sorry, I skipped a line. At the end created man, Mechila. Then after he created the various life forms, he created man as a completion of all of his works, whose substance he made out of the earth. Man was made out of the earth. Right? And as a form, he blew into him an intellectual soul. That's an Ishmat Chaim that God blew into man. So the Emmanuel Abu Ab calls it an intellectual soul, subjecting everything under his dominion. As the Pasuk says in Tehillim, Kol Shata Tahat Raglav, right? The fishes of the sea, the birds of the air, the plants of the animal on earth, bestowing upon him, among many other things, that supreme benefit and prerogative, which is freedom of choice and an autonomous and absolute will. So you see how to be Emmanuel Abba follows Harambam. That what makes man, the essence of man, is his absolute freedom of will, his absolute freedom of choice. On the one hand, man has dominion on earth over all the other life forms. On the other hand, Hashem gives us, so there's a certain autonomy we have, but then we also have freedom of will together with that autonomy. By which he could dispose of his actions according to his wishes, without internal coercion or external influence by any cause that could force him to act against his own wishes, right? So man is ultimately free to choose to do what it is that he wishes to do. In this aspect, man is divine and he imitates his creator. And this is why man has Selem Elohim, like God, who has ultimate freedom and dominion. Of course, God's dominion is an absolute in all realms, right? God's freedom is absolute in all realms. But that's how we are similar to God, structurally speaking. Right, so we imitate our Creator. Blessed be His holy name. Everything that He does by His will and immense goodness, but not as an effective necessity, right? Nothing compels God to do what He does. Even if He decides to forgive the Reshaim as He forgave the people of Nineveh, nobody can tell God, why did you forgive them? And why did you punish these people in Sodom and Amorah the way you punished them, but you forgave Nineveh, right? It's God. I decided I want to forgive them, and I decided I don't want to forgive them. That's my business. He has to give account to no one. Every element has its particular quality, right? And finally, no celestial or terrestrial creature could pass the limited and natural order that the supreme artificer has imposed on it, right? Everybody has a boundary, right? So every creation has a boundary, including man. So there's a boundary. For example, a monkey can swing on the vines. A monkey cannot fly, right? They don't have the ability to fly. Fish can swim underwater, right? Fish cannot breathe above water, and so on. So when God creates, He gives each creation a particular attribute, a particular talent, let's call it. But then there's also particular limitations, right? Only man may dispose with absolute dominion and autonomous will his actions and thoughts. So there is no limitation to man's ability to choose correctly. And man can use his intellect to constantly break free from his current state, which is really interesting because it's not that man's intellect is unlimited. Of course it's limited. It's cloudy now. But rather the point is that man can always grow. So the two things can be correct. at the same time, which is man can always grow, man can always learn new things, but man's knowledge or intellect is not unlimited. So here saying here that we have an immense capacity to use our thoughts and our autonomous will to learn new things, right? And because man is free and the absolute master of his will, we see that God pleads with his people to incline towards the side of virtue, right? Right? And to apply its freedom to his holy service. So God says, I want you, Jewish people, to use your free will to act in a way that comports with the Torah, right? He wouldn't say that if we didn't have the ability to choose to act that way. And because man is a subject who can sin or deserve merit, God admonishes him in his holy law and by mouth of his servants, the prophets, to pursue what is good. That's why God sends Nevi'im to Bnei Israel, because the Jewish people have the ability to sur mera, go away from inequity, va'aseh tov, and to do what is good. Right? And emphatically exhorting him to the veneration and love of the divine in order to deserve thus the eternal beatitude for which he was created. So man was created for some sort of olam haba. There's some beauty in olam haba that we cannot comprehend in olam hazeh. Some unbelievable existence that is beyond our consciousness. We can never grasp what that beauty is in olam haba. But to get that beauty, we need to deserve that beauty. And to deserve that beauty, the pasuk says, "Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha." So God says, I want you to love me. How do I love God? Well, you have to use your mind. How do I use my mind? I use your mind to try to understand God. Study Hanabam, study the Monei Buchim. Understand God. Once you understand God, you can love God. Before you understand God, you can't love God, of course, right? So you say, in the weddings, they say, Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Anachnu Ohavim Otcha. I find that to be a laughable song. I mean, it's kind of like, there's a soccer game and everybody's cheering for the soccer game team. So I guess we're cheering for God in that song. I guess that's what that's about. Whatever. But it's silly. A group of people who have no mental conception of God. Hakadosh Baruch Hu, Anachnu Ohavim Otcha. It's like they say, what is that song? Dolly, I think. Dolly, how I love you, my dear old Dolly. It's probably not Dolly. It's probably some other name. Who knows? Never met Dolly in his life, has no idea what Dolly is. Maybe Dolly is a puppy dog, I don't know. Maybe it's a cute squirrel. Could be a woman, I guess, But you have no clue what Dolly is. And you're thinking, Dolly, how I love you, my dear. Like Shuhada, what is that? It's nonsense, right? So HaKadosh Baruch Hu Anachnu Ohavim Otcha. It's just nonsensical, right? You can't love that which you don't know. So you can't love Dolly if you have no clue what Dolly is, right? Maybe Dolly is somebody's pet parrot. I don't know, right? Right. But if you love God correctly, then you zochet to the beauty, right? Ta'amu v'r'u ki tov Adonai. There's nothing more beautiful than the feeling, the taste of experiencing God, right? Each time that was the end of the quote. Each time the spirit of man blows, it is a new and spontaneous act. In the words of George Santayana, there can be no spirit without wind to impel it. But wind may also blow spirit out. It is each time a new song of the wind, joyful while it blows free and unreturning. What does he mean when he says each time the spirit of man blows, it is a new and spontaneous act? I think what he means, I'm not sure, by the way, I never discussed this passage with my father, Shalom. But I think what he means is the spirit of man is that part of us that enables us to say no to that which is wrong and yes to that which is right. No to the bestial instincts, and yes to intelligence, yes to wisdom. That's a spirit of man blowing. And every time that spirit blows within you, it's a new and spontaneous act. right? Because the Chachamim say that the Yetzer Hara is mithadesh ala adam b'chol yom. Every day the Yetzer Hara is born anew, and therefore the spirit, you, have to blow that spirit anew, so that you can say no to sul merah, right? So you can say no to the ra, setov, and do what's right, right? So he says there can be no spirit without wind to impel it, right? So you need the wind which impels the spirit forward. I think the man himself generates that wind within himself, right? You say no to wrong. You say yes to right. You're blowing the wind that impels the spirit of intelligence. But wind may also blow spirit out. It is each time a new song of the wind, joyful while it blows free and in returning. Interesting, the wind may blow the spirit out. Maybe that's kind of what happened to Moshe Rabbeinu, right? When he went up to Har Sinai and the spirit sort of left Moshe Rabbeinu, now you see it, Vayiten al panav masveh, right? And maybe this is why the Shekhinah was chofefet al gaber Hashem shel Sadiqim, right? Very few people know the real reason for kippah. The real reason for kippah, and Rambam brings in the Monei Nebuchim, is the Sadiqim, the Chachamim. They used to have the Shekhinah chofefet al Shehem, and it was visible. And in order to, as an act of seni'ut, the Chachamim would cover their head, so that you wouldn't see the Shekhinah shining upon them, right? That's the real reason for the kippah, and that's why the kippah was reserved to the Chachamim and the Sadiqim, because if you're putting a kippah, you're not worthy. What are you putting the kippah for, right? That's the thinking anyway. Right. Freedom of choice rejects the belief in a strict causality underlying all activities and phenomenon, right? So we are free. We are free to choose. We are not algorithms, again, as people like Yuval Harari and others like to say. They bring a very, by the way, I don't know if you ever heard of Yuval Harari, but he has a really horrible morality. I mean, for him, human beings are just ultimately just a type of machine. And, he speaks of the eradication of human beings. Like, I don't know, I would speak about, I have a pest in my garden and I want to, eradicate it. And human beings are just, they're just things. It's just unbelievable when you see the two ways of thinking, the Yuval Harari's, the idea that man is just an algorithm, everything we do is just deterministic, and we don't have free will, and we don't have the ability to choose, and therefore just eradicate them. That's why in the left wing you always see about how humanity is a pestilence upon the planet, right? Because human beings are just a pest. We're not real living creatures with choices. And the Torah, I guess everybody will make a choice. Do they want to be a pest, or do they want to be living spirits? It's unbelievable, the evil that is being taught at the universities today, and also at lower level schools, but especially in the universities with these left-wing Marxist professors. I hate to say it, but fascists would have been and even Hitler would have been very comfortable with the idea that they just nothing. Human beings are just algorithms, right? It's a very, very important to understand the implications of these types of ideas that people peddle. Right? It's actually a reversion to Migdal Bavel, where human beings were just cogs in a machine. Anyway, so we reject the idea of strict causality. Thus, there is a basic duality in the universe, a disunity between the realm of physics and the realm of ethics. Yes, in ethics there is causality. Of course, obviously there are scientific rules. In ethics, no. We choose. Spinoza rejected this disunity. By applying the geometrical method to ethics, he was in fact ascertaining the basic unity and uniformity of human activities and of physical phenomena. So Spinoza wanted to apply geometrical reasoning to human affairs, which assumes, like the Yuval Hararis of the world, that human beings are just cogs in a machine. Right? Schelling, as he himself declared, was the completion of what Spinoza had set forth in an initial and bold sketch. For him, rejection of duality, for Schelling, who rejected the idea that there's the physical world where there is causality, and then there's the ethical world of human beings where we choose, right? They reject that. Spinoza rejects that. Schelling rejects that. Hitler certainly rejects that, I would say. And the Marxist ideology rejects that duality, right? And so for him, Yuval Harari certainly rejects that duality, right? So for him, rejection of duality was an affirmation that the absolute identity, the infinite, cannot alienate itself. Okay. Maimonides refers to freedom of choice as the most important doctrine. This freedom is categoric. For Rambam, it's one of the Yud Gimel Ikarim, and universally agreed upon by all Jews. Maimonides did not concern himself with the basic duality that this doctrine posits. He didn't get into the whole question of duality. Maimonides sets forth the idea of Bechira Chofshit without going into, well, there's the physical world, there's the ethical world. He just explains what Bechira Chofshit is about. It is possible that Maimonides did not perceive duality as a valid philosophical problem. Because, I don't have a mitzvah to study Aristotelian causality in order to be a good Jew. I have a mitzvah to be a good Jew, right? And perhaps that's why Rambam didn't get into it, right? Or else, the problem did not even arise since he did not believe in absolute determinism, even in the physical realm. Another possibility, that a reason for why Rambam didn't go into the duality of causality in the physical world, ethics in the world of human beings, is because even causality is a type of illusion. There is causality so long as God wishes there to be causality. God can suspend the laws of causality as he does in Nisim, right? That could be another reason. For instance, he maintained that animal movements are the effect of volition in the sense that they are not determined. Interesting. So even animals have a certain volition. At times, they can act within a realm of possibility, right? So there's certain statistical possibilities and choices that an animal can make. They're not ethical choices. So sometimes I saw once a video of a lion playing with a baby wildebeest. It was kind of like enjoying the baby wildebeest. We don't know what happened afterwards. It could be that later on the lion got hungry and he ate the wildebeest, right? We don't know. But the point is, at that moment in time, the lion apparently felt some compassion for the wildebeest, right? Right. At the cosmological level, too, he considered the uneven distribution of matter in the universe and the different orbital directions of the stars as evidence against absolute determinism. So Rambam says there is no absolute determinism in the realm of the physical world. Even there's a plan. So there are laws of causality. Of course, nobody rejects that. Right? There are scientific laws. Of course, nobody rejects the scientific laws. But there's a plan also, and something is happening that's setting up the pieces the way they're being set up. Right? Although Maimonides upholds causality is not trans-systemic, meaning it's not above the system. Above the system is God. It's within the system, right? And it can be suspended. And notwithstanding causality, there's something above it. It is operative only within a specific context and structure which integrates it. By the way, I believe in quantum mechanics. Perhaps the laws of causality are not exactly as we experience them in classical physics, right? Therefore, there is no real dichotomy between the physical and the ethical, and that's why Rambam didn't get into this duality, physical versus ethical. In Maimonides, the problem of freedom arises in conjunction with his theory of language, and that's something that we will perhaps get into in a future class.